talk for November 25th. My name is Mark Wilson. I'm one of the Cisco Contact Center instructors here at Sunset. And I did, back in September, I did the exam prep for UCCEIS, and it seemed to be a fairly popular topic. So I thought this time around, I'd try to do at least one session on UCCED exam prep. So in this session, what's the target audience? Those of you that, for whatever reason, need or want to take the exam. It's Cisco 600-455. It is the UCCE deployment exam. So our objectives is to my goal is to be able to help you focus your exam prep based upon specific review topics. Um, we're going to review the exam topic list as well as try to point to some specific references that could be helpful to you. In this session, we're going to cover some key points to try to use when preparing for the exam. Primarily to point out the fact that the versions that's covered on the exam are 10.0 and 10.5 of UCCE, which is beginning, for me personally, given my memory, it's beginning to become somewhat of a challenge, especially considering we're starting to work on some R12 materials. And now I've got multiple versions running through my head. The focus is to kind of point out some documents, some Cisco documents and other resources that may be useful in your preparation activities. One of the things we will not do, I won't give you specific points, questions, or details about the exam. I will not be able to guarantee that Cisco has not modified the exam to make this information obsolete. One of the things that I always try to caveat is that my experience and the documentation I've reviewed is all predicated on a UCCE R10 and 10.5 release. Cisco could potentially change it at any given point in time, and I may not be able to keep up with that. In fact, as I was reviewing a little bit earlier today, I noticed that they had already modified one of the websites for this link, which is actually kind of modified one of the points I was going to call out. I won't violate, or at least I will not intentionally violate Cisco policy. And the focus here is the UCCED exam, not the IS. If you're interested in the IS material, then you may want to see if you can track down I think we did a recording back in September, or submit a request and we can see about scheduling another one of those at some point in the future. One of the other points, most of you are probably aware that Cisco has made major announcements regarding changes to the certification program. As of everything I've seen and heard, there are no plans that will affect this material. This being the contact center specialist focused material is actually, my understanding is, it's managed through the ATP group at Cisco, not the typical learning at Cisco. And again, that's the certification side. I know that learning at Cisco is heavily involved with the development of the next version of the course material. So I don't know what the status is, but again, the last I heard a couple months ago, there's nothing scheduled at this point in time to change these exams. So for the foreseeable future, I feel confident that there won't be any major modifications. There's two websites. The first one is off the Cisco main website. So basically, it's what those of us that's been working with Cisco for a while may remember, that there was a link or URL that we could always type in, cisco.com/go/certifications or training. It was one of those two were usually valid. This first one is analogous to that. Basically, if you go to the current Cisco website and go under the menu, select certifications, it will lead you to the site. The second one is directly on the Cisco Learning Network website. Until about, I'm not sure when it was. It's been about 2 weeks since I last looked at these links. But until then, they were somewhat different in what they posted. For example, in the Cisco website, they recommended all 3 courses. And for the Learning Network site, they recommend primarily the UCCE, which is the deployment class. Plus, they have a list of study materials. And part of the reason why we've put together these learning plan sessions is the fact that that list of study materials, at least in my opinion, is not comprehensive. So that's one of my goals here. If you're interested, we can go look at those sites real quick. The first one, the one that goes off of the Cisco link, is, of the main Cisco homepage, is this URL or this page, Designing Cisco Unified Contact Center Enterprise. Earlier, I think it said deployment. My mistake. I keep thinking D stands for deployment, but it's designing in this case. In this web page, I've noticed today that one has been consolidated down to one screen. And if you look at the exam topics here, it actually takes you to the other page, the exam topics on the other page, which I'll show you here in a moment. Sample exam questions seems to be more of a, here's the types of questions, not necessarily valid questions that might help you prepare for this specific exam. If you scroll down these tabs and then links, exam overview, exam preparation, and take exam are all just basically lower parts of this. As mentioned, one of the things you may look at is the fact that all 3 courses, the administering CCE Part 1 and Part 2, as well as the deploying class, tends to be listed on this web page. The other link, and this is the actual Learning Store network, I'm sorry, Learning Network link. Let me see if I can make that more legible, less of an eye exam. So they're both pointing to the same exam. However, this link actually does appear to be a little bit different, but this is the first time I've seen the first link that points to the Learning Network link. So they've changed those web pages in the last, like I said, week or so. In this website, they only recommend the deploying class, the DUCCE, which I can point out that there's some topics that are probably more in the Part 1 and Part 2 classes, as well as the deploying class. The other thing I like to point out on this link is that if you look at exam topics, then it does give you a list of the topics. If you click the show details to expand it, it gives you all the subtopics. You can access the same information through the PDF. And if you're interested in what that PDF looks like, this is it. Pretty straightforward. It's the same information, just available for download in the PDF format. I'll come back to this in a moment, but one of the things I'll point out is the fact that there's percentages listed here. That's a rough percentage of the number of questions you'll find in each major topic area. That being said, they actually, Cisco has a stated policy where they'll do weightings. So it's kind of hard to say exactly whether this is quantity of question. I think of it as quantity of questions, but it could actually be weighting from the way this exam is scored. So you can see on this link that there's several topics and subtopics listed. And the third one, the study materials. A while back when I was preparing to retake the exam for the first time in a few years, I noticed that, for example, features and functionality as a major topic is pointing to the database schema handbook, which I think is a great document. I refer to it and send people to it all the time. However, there's not a lot. There's a lot more to features and functionality than just what's available in the schema handbook. So that's the other reason. That's the other thing here. In fact, there's some cases. Let me see if I can see an example here. I know in the IS exam, there was a lot of these major topics was listed as finesse documentation, and there was a whole lot more than just finesse in that topic area. So going back to our slides. So that's kind of, I like to introduce those two websites real quick. Now there's 6 major topic areas. What I did was even though the exam webpage points out somewhere between 65 to 75 questions, in my experience, most of these in the CCE specialist certification track are in the 70 question range. And I have a tendency to just do a quick allocation of numbers of questions based upon 70 total. I just do the math in a spreadsheet real quick because I think it's useful to kind of see an importance to give me an indication of how many questions and how much focus I would see in those different topic areas. Moving on, in the first topic, major topic, describe the features and functionality of the Cisco Unified CCE solution. As it says in that one website, there was the database schema handbook. I pulled that over. I'm not so sure that that's that important for this topic area, but I figured I'd go ahead and leave it in place, include it in this list. The other thing, just one other quick side note, there's a buddy of mine that has been consistently teaching this material for a couple of decades now. And when he describes these exams, he says, oh, just take the courses and read the SR&D and you'll be all set. Well, the IS exam, I thought there was a lot of information that was covered that was not explicitly in the SR&D or the other courseware explicitly. So I had a tendency to kind of look beyond just the SR&D. I was surprised almost how many of these topics in the first topic 1, that are actually in the design guide. A lot of it is also in UCCE Part 1. If you've attended that class, you know that the first day is all about definitions and other information related to how ICM works, which is the features and functionality. But in the design guide for 10.5, you should be able to find most of this information either in the architecture overview section, the features section, and or the traffic flow section. I also, in fact, I think I may have missed one in this document, and that's the security best practices guide. There is one of the subtopics referring to methods to secure the solution and impact on system capacity and functionality. For that, you should probably look at the security best practices guide if you're not familiar with that topic. Any questions on this first topic so far? Based upon what I've seen with the other exam, the IS, this list was a lot shorter than I had predicted it would be, at least for this first topic. The second topic, however, does get a little broader. It's identified the design considerations for the Cisco Unified Communications Manager in a Cisco Unified CCE solution. So basically, what are some of the things about Call Manager that we need to focus on design-wise for CCE? One of the documents that I found kind of useful is there is the configuration guide for Unified CVP, and in that section is a topic on Unified CVP call flow models. There are a couple of questions distinguishing some of the design between standalone and the comprehensive call flow models. So just in your mind, understanding the differences between those and some of the implications, such as maybe which components might be required in um, a few of the different models that CVP offers. Again, there's call director, there's comprehensive, there's standalone. So there's a few different scenarios there that you may want to be comfortable with before you go take the exam. Um, there's also quite a few topic areas in the SRND for supported mobile agent and caller VoIP endpoints, as well as combining IP telephony and UCCE extensions on the same IP phone. Um, in the topic list, there's a few subtopics that refers to some of the things you'll need to do for transferring calls from agent to agent, um, some of the requirements needed to support mobile agents, some of the things that is not allowed, that aren't really supported with mobile agent, as well as some of the impact regarding multi-line configuration. So that tends to be covered in those two topic areas. There's also a fair amount, a few questions regarded around geographically redundant data centers with clustering over the WAN. Um, Basically, in fact, that's one of the subtopics. And then the other in general is some other CUCM, Communications Manager design considerations. And that is also one of the sections in the UCCE SRND, Solutions Reference Network Design Guide. And since you're here, I'm assuming you're aware of the Sunset Video Reference Library. And there's a few areas. The first is in the video recordings for AUCCE 2, or the Part 2 course. Videos 3 and 4 on subsequent transfers. And that's, again, the transfers related to getting calls from agent to agent and some of the effects on having Communications Manager as your routing client versus having CVP as your routing client. And then the other side is in the Part 1 videos, I think is video 9, that's on the CCE components and architecture, to include a discussion of agent phones and features. That's where you might find more information about multi-line and some of those other topics, as well as just generally the AUCCE Part 1 course. And then we talked some in the deploying class of the UCCE about design of various components, including Communications Manager. Topic area 3, identify the network design considerations. Again, it's SRND is going to be your primary document for this. Looking at the sections entitled CCE failovers during network failures, a discussion on network segments, bandwidth provisioning and QoS considerations. And even though that bandwidth provisioning and QoS considerations, you would assume that that would probably be where you'd start for discussions on QoS, there's also some QoS discussion in some of the other sections, including network segments and geographically redundant data centers. So those all are probably useful sections for various questions on the exam. Some of these actually even the subtopics seem to have had a couple of questions that were related directly to those topics. Um, the deployments, talking about different deployment models for a UCCE deployment. Another section in the SRND is the design considerations for high availability. And then there's a lot of other sections as well that could be useful depending upon how familiar you are with those topic areas. In fact, there are subtopics that are specifically around high availability options. Um, the separate document Cisco has, network design considerations in a UCCE solution. And then the other one I wanted to make sure we pulled out was in DUCCE. I know usually on the last day, the last module, we go through a section where we point out all of the processes. So there's a separate module that goes through if you're familiar with, say, when you start the router service on the server, you have the router process launch, and then you have node manager, manager. And so if you're familiar with how those processes work with each other, as well as how things happen, how those processes respond in failure conditions. One explicit example was the test other side is I think 3.8. And I was struggling, and maybe it's because I was not searching for the right terms, whether it's test other side or test dash other, what have you. But I was struggling finding a document that explicitly talked through that. There were documents such as the serviceability guide that inferred it and kind of talked about it, but it wasn't as explicit as what I think we discuss in the course material for deploying GTE. Any questions on any of those topics so far? Alrighty. Topic area 4, there were quite a few, as you can see, different documents that seemed to be useful. Excuse me. The topic area, identify the design considerations for Cisco Unified ICM, Cisco Finesse, Cisco Unified CVP, and Cisco Unified Intelligence Center in a Cisco Unified CCE solution. The first is the design guide for Unified CVP. There is a topic area, a topic section titled Cisco Unified Border Element, and there's a couple of questions on some of the things that you would need for Cube and configuration specifics that you might need for Cube in a CVP context. I know we also do talk about that a couple times in different courses, whether it's part 2, talking about some of the specific SIP trunking and Cube configurations. We don't go into heavy detail, but we do talk about some of the things you need on the SIP trunks for dialer versus courtesy callback. So we do discuss it in some of the courses, but it's probably a more thorough treatment of it in the design guide for CVP. And then there's several other sections that may have references to other things, such as the subtopic talking about post-call survey functionality. There's the administrator console user guide for CUIC. There's a few pointed questions on CUIC. I'm trying to recall if it's this one or the other topic. Maybe another topic that I was thinking of, and we'll get to that. I think it's topic 5. In the Sunset Learning Video Reference Library, in part 1 material, there was CCE terms, and I think I have a typo there that should have been a UCCE 2 for courtesy callback. We cover a module on courtesy callback when we discuss VXML in the part 2 class. So there's videos there that discuss how that works. You'll need to make sure you understand some of the things around what we do with the Cisco pre-built VXML scripts and this pre-built ICM scripts, and how we might use those to deploy into the and our own solution to be able to have courtesy callback function. Also in the design guide, the UCCE Solutions Reference Network Design Guide, the SRND. Um, again, like we talked previously, geographically redundant data centers with clustering over the WAN. That's a mouthful there. But then also the features section, talking about different features, including whisper announcement, um, agent greeting, and some of those types of features. As well as there's a section titled Cisco Unified Desktop Solution, because there are a few things that there's one of the subtopics that mentions finesse features and using third-party gadgets in relationship. There, I'm going to kind of jump ahead a little bit. Oh, and actually, where is that? Oh, and down towards the bottom, there's the listing, the reference to Cisco Finesse Administration Guide. There's manage workflows. You need to make sure you're comfortable with that. There's a question or two with how you would manage workflow or how to administer the workflow portion of Finesse administration. One of the ones I reference a lot in the IS exam, scripting and media routing guide, back up in the middle section here, the scripting and media routing guide for Cisco Unified ICM and CCE. One of the areas in particular is contact categorization. How does ICM go through and do different things with call type, requalify, and how those functions work in the deployment? In the features guide, there's a section on whisper announcement, which I didn't look for it, but you can probably find it in the configuration guide for voice portal for whisper announcement, as well as the courtesy callback section for configuration. Excuse me. And then the finesse admin guide, I mentioned the workflows, but also there's a few other sections that you might find about finesse features and third-party gadgets, etc. Kind of, I thought it was kind of interesting how they positioned it both in the topics as well as the questioning was agent targeting rules that you'll be able to find listed in the configuration guide. So if some of these topics you're not really comfortable with, you should be able to find some pretty good information in most of these documents for that, whichever topic it is that you're looking at. For topic area 5, we have describing the sizing process for contact center resources and CCE components. And as you probably could predict, the SRND for CCE, there's a section titled Sizing Contact Center Resources. There's also a section in there regarding sizing components and servers. I think it's kind of interesting. They actually have one chapter just on going through and defining the terms. The use of Erlang B, Erlang C, when you would use one versus the other. Busy hour call attempts, BHCA, and a lot of the different terminology that we rely upon when we're doing sizing and those types of design considerations. There's also one that, or just in general, the packaged contact center design guide. So package PCCE, the design guide for that solution. Um, there's one of the topics on capacity for packaged. Let's see. Um, that's probably good for there, but yeah, the sizing the resources and sizing the components, several like topic 5.6, the factors it's used in sizing bandwidth, as well as the 5.1 common sizing inputs such as agent talk time, queue time. Um, those are all good to just have a decent idea. There was a question that I thought was kind of interesting with different call flows and actually being able to on the fly calculate a projected number of invites per second. So to help you manage the sizing of the SIP proxy server and other SIP proxy and SIP trunking elements. It was one question, so I wouldn't spend a lot of energy on it unless you feel concerned about it. But there was one question that went into that type of calculation. It was pretty basic, but it was understanding the number of um, invites on different call flows, different types of feature sets. Topic 6 is describe the virtualization environment for contact center resources and UCCE components. Excuse me. I personally have not done a lot of deployments of the UCS. If I've done it, it's been usually a C server, but I haven't done a lot of UCSCs in this type of environment, just more of a communications manager environment. So I spend a little bit of energy here. There's a lot of information available on the Cisco.com website. Probably one of them that I ran across was design considerations for high availability and scalability in blade server environments. It is a white paper and it seems to be a few years old, but because it's more of a design considerations without specific details on speeds and fees and what's the number of this and that for a given piece of hardware, it's still pretty applicable. So that could be useful to you. There's separate documents, and not that I would necessarily expect you to capture all of these URLs, but I thought I'd just show the URLs here. But the key things is if you just went to Cisco's website and search for UCS network configuration for unified CCE, the document virtualized collaboration storage design requirements, virtualization for Cisco package CCE, as well as virtualization for unified contact center enterprise. There's not, I wouldn't necessarily be overly concerned with memorizing all of the details and speeds and fees and those types of things, unless it's something that you need to do day to day. But understanding things like what type, what VMware features are supported and which ones are not. Which, how would you do different NIC configurations in a virtualization environment? When I read that topic first, the way NIC was capitalized, I thought they were referring to the network interface controller when you're doing pre-routing in an ICM environment from the carrier, but it actually is talking about the network interface card NIC. Some of the other points about some of the things you'd want to consider for network connectivity with UCS B series fabric interconnect, as well as some other design considerations for UCCE on B system, on B series chassis, as well as some of the considerations for design, as well as upstream switches for the C series as well. Those, like I said earlier, those are generalized. The questions on those are more generalized and probably fairly common sense if you know much about networking and server deployments, but it wouldn't hurt to go through and just review it real quick so that you feel comfortable if it's new material to you. Um, I also think it's useful. One of the things that I have a tendency to always look for whenever I'm doing these types of focus, the network design considerations in a unified CCE, and I missed it earlier, the serviceability um, best practices. That's where you're going to find everything from SNMP to an overview of how the failover works between the processes, between MDS, paired enabled, paired disabled, some of those types of concepts. Because Communication Manager and those other solutions are included, you might also go take a glance at the Collaboration Solutions Design Guidance, and there's the link for it there. That's more about um, different virtualization and other solution consideration for the UC specifically, but because CUCM falls under that category, that may be a useful reference. And then the other one, I remember that there was a couple of pieces of information I could not find, a couple of topics I couldn't find a reference to, and I actually found it in the SRND for CUIC. I think there was a topic discussing bandwidth and um, bandwidth usage in a CUIC deployment. So I just went ahead and just generically put in, you might need to or might want to go glance through the SRND for the separate product sets, whether it's the unified or the package deployment, CVP, and CUIC. Any questions? Any comments? Alrighty. If anything comes up, reach out to us. And if you're on the website, on the next website, then the discussion boards might be a good way since multiple of us interact through that. And I hope you have a great Thanksgiving week and take care.